Defining religion through parody. Applying Geertz's definition of religion to the Church of Helix. During this presentation, we will be studying Geertz's definition of religion as broken down into five parts, how he wrote it, and we will be applying that to what I will call, for the purpose of this presentation, the Church of Helix, a parody religion, which we will take a look at what that actually is a little bit later. Clifford Geertz was an anthropologist in the late 20th century and a religious scholar, and he presented his very famous definition of religion in an essay, Religion as a Cultural System, which was published in 1966. If you've at all studied religion in any way, you're very aware that many scholars have tried to define religion, and they all seem to come up short in some way and have their strengths in some areas and weaknesses in others. And it's a very big task for him to go and try to define all of religion through this one definition. So what we're going to be applying this to is the Church of Helix. And what you'll see throughout this presentation, and what I will show, is that the Church of Helix highlights the points of Geertz's definition of religion through its use of parody and overemphasizing those points. And, why is it important to apply this to the Church of Helix? Quote from Geertz in the same essay, Religion as a Cultural System, he says, "Although it is notorious that definitions establish nothing, in themselves they do, if they are carefully enough constructed, provide a useful orientation or reorientation of thought, such that an extended unpacking of them can be an effective way of developing and controlling a novel line of inquiry." So that really will focus our goal today, and why it is important to do this. By studying this definition on the parody religion, it will actually help us to understand how our society understands religion and defines it itself, through the points that they thought it was important for this religion to have to establish itself in this way. So the Church of Helix was started online from a simple crowdsourcing game. It's called Twitch. Had a game of Pokemon where users would type in commands into a chat box, and those commands would control this simple Pokemon game. And that made the game quite interesting, where you had thousands of people typing commands at the same time and just the player going everywhere, and a lot of things happened. This game lasted for 16 days, from February 12th to March 1st, 2014. But one of the most interesting that happened during this game is that the players started to construct a religion around the world of the game and what was happening in the game. They started to attribute the things that were happening to the deities that they were creating, and understanding this world through the lens of the religion that they were creating. A lot of the creation of this religion was also crowdsourced and done on the online forum Reddit, through a forum on the website dedicated to, where you can find a lot of information about the religion as it was developed over time, and see just a lot of content that people developed for the sake of this parody religion. So now we're just going to take a look at a short video that someone made that really just sums up the game and what happened, and will help you have a better understanding of this Church of Helix.
Once, in a land long darkened by the shadow of anarchy, two ancient deities delivered knowledge unto man so as to craft him in their own image. The divine Helix gave man the gifts of life and music, and granted him great wisdom in his benevolence. The usurper god, the vast and terrible Dome, drove his followers to madness in the revelation of their darkest instincts, carving treacherous ledges into the earth and raising islands covered in fat guys to block the path to enlightenment. In time, the gods slumbered in Mount Moon, and their prophets fled to the pure, unsullied tall grass and black cities of metal and stone, where they might await their master's return. Yet unbeknownst to the followers of Helix and Dome, a third quietly pierced the veil, the ancient and unknowable Old Amber, who delivered a prophet of his own, constrained by neither good nor evil, anarchy nor democracy, to the bowels of a molding power plant on Route 10. Old Amber finally entered the service of Dragon Tamer Lance, and the trio slumbered and waited. Now you, all of you, the great gibbering voices of the old world, must return to inhabit the body of a 10-year-old child and return Lord Helix's dominion to this land, all while resisting the temptations of the Dark Prophet Flareon and his Lord's will for ultimate destruction. You will be the very best, like no one ever was. His will is eternal. Helix be praised! Have fun.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at Geertz's definition, and then we can begin applying it to the Church of Helix. So Geertz defines religion as a system of symbols which acts to establish power, persuasive, and long-lasting moods and motivations in men by formulating conceptions of a general order of existence and clothing these conceptions with such an aura of factuality that the moods and motivations seem uniquely realistic. Really is a lot to take in at once, and just a lot of really interesting language that needs to be defined. And we're just really going to take it one point at a time. It's important to note here that the numbers for each parts of this religion are not insertions. Geertz actually broke up the definition in this way, so it'll be naturalist for us to look at it one at a time, going through these 5 points of the definition. So the first point is a system of symbols which acts to. And, what does this mean? What are these symbols? This kind of needs to be defined a little bit. Geertz says that things are symbols because they are tangible formulations of notions, abstractions from experience fixed in perceptible forms or concrete embodiments of ideas, attitudes, judgments, longings, or beliefs. And so what this means is that the trends that people saw happening in the game, or the things that people see happening in their world, become laid out in more concrete and tangible forms or symbols which represent these greater realities. And so in the game we had a variety of symbols. As you saw, there were 2 gods based on fossils and ancient Pokemon from the game. And there were also the Pokemon characters in the game who fought, you saw, were referred to as prophets, false prophets. One Pokemon earned the name Bird Jesus. And you'll see that there are a lot of Christian influences on this religion. So we can see fan art for this game online. So you can see this person made their own, we might call it a shrine, to Pokemon Red, the game that was played. We see a shell in the middle representing the fossil, the Helix fossil, and some cards representing symbolically that Pokemon. And here you can see a picture of Bird Jesus, the fan art that was made. We also can see this sort of symbolic theology that was created around the religion. We see a Holy Trinity, another very Christian influence that's made between these pieces. We see the evil on the bottom and the things that symbolize evil in the game. And we can see each of the players and what they represent. So you'll see one of them is the chosen one. Different things like that really characterized these religions and symbolized greater trends in the game. And here we see a very another just portrayal of the symbolism of each of these characters in the game. You'll see the Helix fossil up on the top, and on the bottom, Pokemon Flareon, which is called the False Prophet and really represents evil in the game. You can see a series of arrows around the game pointing different ways, which kind of show the disorder of everyone entering commands at different times. And this is kind of referred to as anarchy mode in the game. And this was actually celebrated as a good thing. This is what people really enjoyed. And so they kind of worship this anarchy, and Helix is this kind of god of anarchy, which makes the game interesting. And you'll see other Pokemon throughout this picture, and you can really see that the Pokemon up at the top are really valued. They have halos around them, and the ones at the bottom, Flareon, are kind of placed lower to represent their dark side. And so all of these kind of represent as these symbols, these things that people could talk about tangibly to represent the greater themes within the game. The next part of this definition is that these symbols establish powerful, persuasive, and long-lasting moods and motivations in men by, and then we'll continue on. So what are moods and motivations? We're going to go ahead and look at these one at a time, starting with motivations. A motivation is a persisting tendency a chronic inclination to perform certain sorts of acts and experience certain sorts of feelings in certain sorts of situations. And the sorts here don't really matter. They can be very diverse, but it's just explaining that there's a certain constructed reaction to different events or experiences, and these are your motivations. And we want to look at how the game established those. Yeah, what we can see is a trend of consulting the Helix fossil. The way that this whole fandom around the Helix fossil that ended up becoming deified started was that through all of the random commands entered by players, they kept trying to use an item that they'd found that was the Helix fossil, and the game kept telling them, you can't use that Helix fossil right now. And it happens so frequently during the game and during battle that players began to think of it almost as a form of divination, where they would interact with the Helix fossil god and find his will and intention, similar to what we might think of as a magic 8-ball or a conch shell. And here you can just see this picture of Bird Jesus consulting the Helix fossil, and you will see a lot of different depictions in what people just called consulting the Helix fossil. And that really is the motivation here. People see that as their way to react and to act in the world through the lens of their deities and the religion that they have created. And Geertz really defines the moods by contrasting them to the motivations. And he says the most important difference between moods and motivations is that motivations are made meaningful with reference to the ends toward which they are conceived to conduce. So that means that motivations have an end goal, whereas moods are made meaningful with reference to the conditions from which they are conceived to spring. So this means that moods aren't really directional, trying to get you somewhere like consulting the Helix fossil. Instead, they are a more emotional or natural reaction to what you're experiencing. So we really interpret them in terms of his sources, is what he says. And so with these moods, we really want to look at how do players respond to different events in the game and how do they feel about them within the context of this religion that they've created. There was a event in the game where 12 Pokemon were released on one day into the wild and just lost in the game. And this was referred to as Bloody Sunday. And this depiction right here is a depiction representing Bloody Sunday. You see in the very center the dome fossil, which represents evil, and on the right his false prophet Flareon. The person on the left who is sacrificing the Pokemon is a computer, which is where the Pokemon were lost in the game through a PC system. And this really depicts kind of this event that was a really key moment in the game that people centralized on as just kind of the epitome of evil. And we can see the way they're reacting to it, that these 12 Pokemon weren't just released through commands in a PC, but really they were released at the will of the Dome God and Flareon, and they're really understanding it in this way. And we can, in an article by AV Club, the author sums it up. He says, the players didn't let problems like that hold them back, though. Acolytes of the Helix still sang praises of Bird Jesus and talked about how they'd overcome the evils that stood in their way. Everything that happened, good or bad, fueled the meta-narrative that they were creating. And so the more that these things happened, the more that these events, good or bad, happened, the more that they were attributed to these greater forces, and the more that they just became real, and that every time something happened, the players would experience these moods in this context based on the religion and the events around them. So next we want to look at here's the quote for you. Formulating conceptions of a general order of existence. So, what does this mean? Geertz says symbols or systems which induce and define dispositions we set off as religious, and those which we place those dispositions in a cosmic framework. So he's saying, what does this mean? He's saying basically that these symbols don't just exist around us in the world, but they expand into a cosmic framework. They define an ultimate reality of what is good and evil, not just that one God is happens to be good or evil, but he embodies and personifies the greater idea and force of good in the world. And we really do see this in the game a lot. Wrote a blog post summarizing the game after it finished, and they kind of described the game as the struggle between anarchy and democracy. And it really was this struggle between the chaos of the game of all these people entering commands and the second mode of the game that would try to only use the most popular command within a 10-second period to make the game go faster, and players really rejected this. And the Helix fossil was the god of anarchy, and Dome was the god of democracy, and their rivalry against each other in the game was really representative of a greater cosmic reality and general order of existence of anarchy versus democracy. And here we see another quote from the AV Club. If Lord Helix represented everything good that happened in Twitch Plays Pokemon, then a creature called Flareon was the opposite. And you see that they really are dealing in these absolutes of a general order of existence, and what these Pokemon and what these symbols are representing is really greater than their actual actions and what they're taking only in the game, but extends far beyond that. This cosmic framework and these symbols are, they are clothing these conceptions with such an aura of factuality. So what does this mean? They're doing this such an aura of factuality. Here it says, a quote that actually becomes quite interesting when we're looking at a parody religion. How is it that the religious man moves from a troubled perception of experienced disorder to a more or less settled conviction of fundamental order? And I think this is a really unique quote that can be applied to the Church of Helix, which was formed around anarchy, around the disorder of thousands of people trying to command one person and move him through a game and a series of puzzles and actions. And that this sense of disorder was, although they kept that and worshipped the anarchy, they still created a sense of order around that, and that there was a cosmic order around the forces of anarchy and the forces of democracy. And I think that really just highlights this quote that how it really is about order and disorder and this aura of factuality. And Geertz says, a prior acceptance of authority which transforms that experience when he's talking about this. And I think really does transform that experience. This game was very different because of what was previously called the meta game, but the religion based on it, the cosmic framework, really did change the way the players experienced the game. When something bad happened, they were quick to blame Flareon. When they had the fossil, their goals really changed to go to a place where they could make this fossil a Pokemon and bring it to life. And that became much more of a goal than the standard form of victory for the game until they had completed that. And this sort of parody religion really did transform the experience of that game of Twitch Plays Pokemon. Is that the moods and motivations, which we already looked at, seem uniquely realistic. And Geertz describes this in an interesting way. He says, the dispositions which religious rituals induce thus have their most important impact from a human point of view outside the boundaries of the ritual itself, as they reflect back to color the individual's conception of the established world of bare fact. And what he's really saying here is that religious ideals and these realities, these moods and motivations don't just exist in a little religious context, but they exist everywhere for the person who understands them that way and practices them. And we really see this in the Church of Helix too. It extends across the internet far beyond just this one game, and we can see that really well. First, there's a website created called Consult the Fossil, where you can go to askhelixfossil.com and type in a question, and we'll give you an answer, a question about anything. And this was just a way for players to create this experience of consulting the fossil outside the game about anything. They could still experience in this way and rely on it in this way. And the r/place, which was started on Reddit this year in 2017 on April 1st, April Fool's Day, over 3 years after the Twitch Plays Pokemon and the Church of Helix was created in 2014. And what this was see the description that's on the page. There is an empty canvas. You may place a tile upon it, but you must wait to place another. Individually, you can create something. Together, you can create something more. And it was a huge canvas of pixels where users could go on and just place a single color and then wait for a certain amount of time and then place another. And groups began working together to form pictures and forming these groups. And interestingly, you'll see one of the first pictures that forms is a picture of the Helix god. And we're going to look at a little bit of a video as people try to attack and replace the pixels that made this image. The Church of Helix Reddit forum really banded together and called each other to arms and said, come protect this, come onto this place and put in the right pixels and protect our image here. And you can really see that this will really be a great example of how the ideas of this religion, the moods and motivations of this religion extend well beyond the game and the world in which they were constructed.
Okay, this is the plan. All right, guys, let's look for the apple tree. Everybody look for the apple tree. Everybody, we're going to be expanding into Rainbow Road.
Towards Helix. Towards Helix.
Where's Helix?
Hey, 10 minutes.
ETA 1 minute. ETA 1 minute.
1 minute, guys. All right, we're gonna place by birthday month. I will call out month. We will have 10 seconds in between each month.
Helix codes are 603-414.
All right, guys. January. Here we go. Month starts
10
going.
seconds. 10
January
seconds. 10
month,
seconds.
3,
9.
yeah, go in. 6, 5, 8, 4,
Go, February, now.
well, go.
5 seconds. 5 seconds.
Start going for Helix, guys. Go for Helix.
5,
March
4, 3, 2, 1. March, place.
Go.
Oh yeah, wait. Everyone shut up. Tell the fence square about the trans flag going down.
Trans flag is getting covered, it's fine. They have regular for sure.
April.
Alright, quick, before they prepare, we gotta go May. May 5. May 5.
May start going. May go.
3, 2, 1. May go. Alright, we gotta go June.
Remember, the void can survive even if it gets
3,
disconnected.
2, 1. June.
Wait, which part are we in?
July 5,
July.
2, 1, go.
July, go. They're passion passive.
Yeah, so as we saw in that video, it really did illustrate the way that the people who participated in the Church of Helix it didn't stay contained to the Pokemon world where it was constructed or even to their own form, but went far beyond that, and it really was a cause for them to champion. And so with all of this, we can really see the function of the parody in this religion. We could see how these people in constructing a religion really focused on certain aspects that they thought were important to a religion and over exaggerated them for the purpose of parody. When it came to each of the points, whether it was consulting their divine being and consulting the Helix fossil through divination, whether it was the symbols and the ultimate realities of good and evil. If it was that these things became a reality that extended well beyond the game and a cosmic framework through which to see the world. All of these things were really embodied in this parody religion, and the emphasis on them for the sake of parody also makes a great emphasis on them for the sake of definition. And it really highlights and brings out Geertz's definition. I think one of the reasons it does this so well can be summed up in a way that Craig Martin tells in his book, Introduction to the Critical Study of Religion, where he says, when you're trying to define a child what a car is, when they ask you what's a car, you don't define it by describing the engine and how the engine works and all the ins and outs of the car, but instead you just point at a series of cars. And Martin says that this might be the best way to define religion, is just to point at it and to understand the colloquial sense of the term. And I think that this parody religion does that really well because it defines religion through an experience rather than through a language, which will never be perfect and will always fall short in some way with the vast landscape of world religions. And so I think that really is the function of parody that we see here, and the value in applying Geertz's definition to the Church of Helix. I'll also include the links to the 2 YouTube videos shown in the comments, and all of the links to the pictures which were shown are shown on the slide next to the picture rather than at the end, so you can know which one goes with which picture. Thank you guys so much.